In the autumn of 1895, entire families began to vanish from the isolated farming community of Blackwood Valley, Indiana. Not one by one, but whole bloodlines, erased. Their empty homes stood as silent monuments, their fields left fallow. The disappearances were met only with vague explanations. They moved west for better land. They were called to a more righteous life elsewhere, or simply, they have departed from us. No letters ever arrived from these departed souls. No confirmation of their new lives reached those who wondered. They were simply gone. Official records from Washington County list 27 families, comprising 114 souls, who vanished from Blackwood Valley between 1895 and 1899 without a single verifiable trace of their continued existence elsewhere. If you have the courage to hear what really happened in the shadows of our past, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what state you're watching from. Are you brave enough to join our community of true mystery seekers? What makes this story particularly chilling isn't merely the scale of the disappearances, but the calculated precision with which they were executed and the unspeakable purpose they served. This wasn't random violence or spontaneous cruelty, but something far more terrifying, a systematic program of human harvesting hidden behind a facade of religious devotion. The truth about Blackwood Valley challenges our understanding of what humans are capable of doing to one another in the name of faith. It shows us how easily an entire community can be slowly conditioned to participate in, or at least silently witness, unspeakable atrocities. This is the macabre mystery of the Blackwood farmers. To understand how such horrors could remain hidden for so long, we must first understand Blackwood Valley itself, a place seemingly designed for secrets. Nestled in southwestern Indiana, Blackwood Valley existed in near-complete isolation from the rapidly modernizing world of the late 19th century. The valley formed a natural enclosure, a fertile basin surrounded on three sides by the densely wooded Hoosier Hills, with access limited to a single winding road that became treacherously impassable during winter months and spring floods. This geographic isolation was no accident. The valley had been deliberately chosen in 1867 by its founder and patriarch, Elder Jeremiah Blackwood, precisely because it offered natural barriers against outside influence and unwanted scrutiny. The settlement didn't appear on official maps until 1880, and even then was marked simply as Blackwood Settlement, an insignificant notation that drew little interest from government officials. The nearest town of any size, Millport, lay 23 miles to the east, a full day's journey by wagon over rough terrain. Surviving accounts describe a community of approximately 60 families living in remarkable self-sufficiency. The Blackwood farmers grew their own crops, raised their own livestock, produced their own textiles, and constructed their own buildings. Trading expeditions to external communities occurred only twice yearly, conducted exclusively by men designated by Elder Blackwood as sufficiently steadfast in faith to resist outside corruptions. This physical isolation was reinforced by a spiritual isolation equally effective. The religious practices of Blackwood Valley, while nominally Christian, had evolved into something unique and insular under Elder Blackwood's guidance. Former resident Hannah Cutler described the community's beliefs in a sworn affidavit. "We were taught that the outside world was irredeemably corrupt. Elder Blackwood preached that we alone preserved the true faith, that we alone would be spared when the great purification came. We were forbidden to read any books except the Bible, as interpreted by the elder, forbidden to speak with outsiders except when absolutely necessary for trade, forbidden even to express curiosity about the world beyond our valley." The community's daily life was governed by rigid adherence to what Elder Blackwood called the disciplines, extensive rules covering everything from prayer schedules to appropriate topics of conversation. These rules were enforced through public shaming, punishment rituals, and the threat of expulsion, described as spiritually equivalent to eternal damnation. Each day began before dawn with mandatory community prayer in the meeting house. Work assignments were distributed daily by Deacon Silas Thorne, with everyone assigned specific tasks considered appropriate to their age, gender, and spiritual status. The community operated on the principle of shared providence. All resources were centrally collected and redistributed according to need as determined by the leadership. This system effectively concentrated economic control in Elder Blackwood's hands. Education consisted primarily of religious instruction, basic literacy, and practical skills. Scientific knowledge was limited to what was directly applicable to farming. History was taught exclusively through the lens of religious persecution and the community's founding narrative. Healthcare was provided by Sister Mary Agnes, whose knowledge of herbal medicine was supplemented by claimed divine healing abilities. Conventional medical treatment required explicit permission from Elder Blackwood, permission frequently withheld for ailments deemed to have spiritual rather than physical causes. Most disturbing was the community's response to dissent. Those who questioned leadership were subjected to escalating correction. Minor infractions resulted in public confession and additional labor. More serious challenges led to purification sequestration, isolation in windowless rooms with only bread and water. For the most serious offenses, particularly attempts to leave the community, the punishment was deep purification, secretive rituals conducted in underground chambers beneath the meeting house. Those who underwent them either remained afterward, displaying disturbing personality changes, or they became part of the growing list of families who moved west for better land. County records show that between 1895 and 1899, 27 families disappeared. In each case, their departure was explained as voluntary relocation. In each case, their property was absorbed back into community holdings, and in each case, no verifiable contact was ever established with them afterward. The pattern behind these disappearances is clear in retrospect. The families who vanished were predominantly those who had questioned community practices, expressed desire to leave, or defied Elder Blackwood's authority. Sarah Collins, whose family traded with the Blackwood community, later testified, "It was always the troublemakers who left, or so we were told. Anyone who asked too many questions. After a while, it seemed like only the quietest, most obedient types were left. They all had the same blank, peaceful expression, and they all said the same things, almost word for word, when asked about those who'd gone." By 1899, the remaining population had been effectively culled of all dissenters. What remained was a community of true believers, or those too terrified to appear otherwise. The stage was set for horrors that would not be fully revealed until decades later. To understand the monstrous events that unfolded in Blackwood Valley, we must first understand the three individuals who orchestrated them. Intelligence and charisma, perverted to unspeakable ends, wrapped in the protective mantle of spiritual authority. Elder Jeremiah Blackwood, the community's founder and unquestioned leader, established the settlement in 1867. He presented himself as a former minister who had received divine revelation to establish a purified community away from corrupting influences. Surviving photographs reveal a man of imposing physical presence, tall and broad-shouldered, with a full beard streaked with gray and eyes of remarkable intensity. Multiple accounts describe his voice as hypnotic, deep and resonant, capable of holding listeners spellbound for hours. Mary Bedford, who fled the community, wrote in her 1912 memoir, "His power over people was unlike anything I have witnessed. When Elder Blackwood spoke, it was as if no other voice existed in the world. He could make the most outrageous demands sound reasonable. The most terrible sacrifices seemed necessary and right. His eyes never left yours when he spoke to you. It was like being captured, like drowning in his certainty." What distinguished Blackwood from common charlatans was his remarkable intellect. Papers discovered in community records reveal considerable education and detailed knowledge of religious history, agricultural science, and human psychology. His private journals show careful planning stretching years into the future. Most disturbing were his sermons, which evolved over time to increasingly focus on spiritual harvesting, a concept that blended biblical language with disturbing metaphors about extracting spiritual essence. By 1895, Blackwood spoke increasingly of vessels and conduits, of spiritual energy that could be transferred from one person to another, and of his divine mandate to gather and preserve the life force of the chosen for the coming tribulation. From recovered journal fragments, April 12, 1890, "I have been granted a new vision of our purpose. We are not merely to separate ourselves from corruption. We are to become vessels of concentrated spiritual energy. The Lord has shown me that faith itself is a tangible force that can be harvested, stored, and utilized. Those whose faith is weak become sources for those whose vessels are strong. And later, January 3rd, 1894, the preparation of the underground chambers progresses well. Silas has designed a system of channels and reservoirs that should serve our purpose admirably. Mary Agnes has perfected the preservation mixture. Soon we will begin the true work, the harvesting that will prepare us for the coming darkness. By all accounts, Blackwood's public persona never betrayed the horrific plans documented in his private writings. Deacon Silas Thorne, Blackwood's right hand and the community's administrative enforcer, presented a study in contrast to his charismatic superior. Where Blackwood was commanding and inspirational, Thorne was quiet and methodical. Where Blackwood dealt in grand visions, Thorne concerned himself with practical details. Born Silas Thornton in Philadelphia, he had been trained as an accountant before joining Blackwood's following in 1866. Physical descriptions consistently mention his unnervingly steady hands and cold blue eyes. A man who could observe without being observed, Thorne maintained the Ledger of Blessings, an extensive accounting system tracking every resource, work contribution, and spiritual infraction of each community member. This ledger reveals the true nature of Blackwood Valley's economy, resources manipulated to reward obedience and punish questioning. Most disturbing were entries beginning in 1895, when Thorne began a new ledger section titled simply Harvest. These clinical records documented the processing of entire families, with detailed inventories of their possessions, assessments of their physical conditions, and calculations of their yield potential. A recovered page from July 1896 reads, Harvested, Emmett family, 6 total, father, mother, grandmother, children ages 12, 9, 7. Physical condition generally good except grandmother, circulation issues. Estimated yield, 26 units. Actual yield, 24 units. Efficiency, 92%. Notes, younger subjects provide significantly higher quality. Former community member Jacob Finley, who escaped in 1899, described Thorne's role. Deacon Thorne was the one who decided which families would be called to greater service. He watched everyone, made notes on everything. And he was the one who came to your house at night with 2 or 3 men to tell you that you had been specially selected for what they called deeper communion. Thorne's personal quarters, discovered during later investigations, contained hidden maps of underground facilities, schedules of harvesting operations, and technical drawings for equipment that could only have served horrific purposes. Sister Mary Agnes, the third member of this terrible triumvirate, appears to have been driven by a warped form of compassion, a belief that her actions, however terrible, served a higher healing purpose. Born Mary Agnes Winters in Boston, she had studied herbal medicine before joining Blackwood's community in 1873. As the community's healer, she built intimate trust with every family in the settlement. Physical descriptions consistently mention her unusual quietness of movement, an ability to appear in rooms without people noticing her entrance, and her soft, soothing voice that could calm even the most distressed patients. Mary Agnes had unquestioned access to every home and intimate knowledge of every resident's physical and emotional vulnerabilities. She identified potential harvest candidates, particularly focusing on those showing signs of illness, emotional distress, or spiritual doubt, conditions she interpreted as indications that their essence was already fading and should be preserved. Her personal journals reveal a mind that had constructed an elaborate justification for unspeakable acts. June 22, 1896. I am not taking life but preserving its essence. The physical body is merely a vessel, often a flawed one. When I release the spiritual essence from its damaged container, I am performing the highest form of healing, allowing the pure energy to continue serving the community rather than being lost to weakness and doubt. Mary Agnes prepared families for processing through weeks of administering special tonics, chemical compounds designed to make them more compliant. Analysis of her medicinal stores revealed sophisticated knowledge of sedatives, hypnotics, and mind-altering substances. She also developed the actual techniques used to extract what they believed to be spiritual essence from their victims, procedures combining primitive medical practices, ritualistic bloodletting, and systematic application of pain. Most horrifying was the apparent belief that the process worked best when the victim remained conscious as long as possible. Former assistant Elizabeth Crawley provided this chilling testimony. She would sing hymns throughout the entire procedure, her voice never wavering, even as she did things no human should do to another. She truly believed she was saving something precious from each person. And the worst part is that she seemed to feel genuine love for them, even as she destroyed them. Together, these three individuals created a system of control, exploitation, and destruction that operated with terrifying efficiency. Blackwood provided the charismatic vision and spiritual authority, Thorne the organizational precision and surveillance, and Mary Agnes the medical knowledge and perverted compassion. By 1895, with the community thoroughly under their control and the underground facilities completed, they were ready to implement the full scope of their horrific vision. The harvesting had begun in earnest, and the families of Blackwood Valley were about to face the true purpose of their isolated existence. The first meaningful challenge to Blackwood Valley's carefully constructed facade came from an outsider. James Harrington, a government land surveyor, who arrived in the spring of 1897. Harrington, a veteran of the U.S. Geological Survey, had been dispatched to update topographical records of Washington County. What made him dangerous to the Blackwood regime was his keen observational skills, official authority, and complete immunity to the community's spiritual manipulation. From Harrington's field journal, recovered decades later. April 18, 1897. Arrived at settlement identified as Blackwood. Residents display marked reluctance to interact. Most striking observation: unusual uniformity in speech patterns and physical mannerisms across different age groups and family units. Residents appear to be reciting prepared responses rather than engaging in natural conversation. During his survey, Harrington noticed a discrepancy between the visible foundation of the meeting house and its internal dimensions, suggesting the existence of hidden spaces. When questioned, Deacon Thorne claimed the configuration related to future expansion plans, an explanation contradicting the weathering evidence that indicated original construction. Harrington's suspicions deepened when he attempted to survey the wooded area behind the meeting house. 3 community members immediately intercepted him, insisting the area was designated for private spiritual reflection. When Harrington explained his federal mandate, Elder Blackwood himself appeared with remarkable speed, suggesting an alternative route that would bypass the restricted area. That evening, a young woman identified only as Ruth appeared at Harrington's cabin after dark. Her manner was furtive, her speech fearful, dramatically different from the uniform pleasantness displayed by other community members. Her warning was cryptic but urgent. "Don't go near the earth behind the meeting house. Don't ask about the families who left. They'll say you went west too." The next morning, when Harrington inquired about Ruth, he was informed that Sister Ruth and her family were called to service in our western communities 3 months ago. Harrington's final journal entry reads, April 23, 1897, accelerating survey completion based on mounting concerns. Community behavior exhibits all hallmarks of concealment. Residents display unnatural behavioral uniformity. Most concerning, no children engage in spontaneous play. All activities appear choreographed and monitored. Will report concerns to regional office upon return. Harrington filed his report with the regional survey office, including a supplemental document detailing his concerns. This report disappeared from government files within days of submission. The surveyor himself vanished 3 weeks later, while traveling between assignments. His horse and equipment were found abandoned along a remote trail. The only surviving copy of Harrington's observations was a personal letter he had sent to his brother. There is something deeply wrong in Blackwood Valley. The people move and speak as if operated by hidden machinery. And beneath the meeting house, something vast has been constructed, something requiring substantial excavation and reinforcement. Whatever religious purpose they claim, no faith I know of requires such elaborate underground structures or generates such fear in its adherents. A second challenge came from Reverend Thomas Caldwell, a Methodist circuit preacher who attempted to include Blackwood Valley in his regular rotation of services in late 1897. Unlike Harrington, Reverend Caldwell approached the community as a fellow Christian seeking to provide spiritual support. This presented a unique threat. the presence of an alternative religious voice with legitimate credentials. When initially received with orchestrated politeness but firm rejection, Reverend Caldwell made a second attempt to visit in early 1898, arriving unannounced during worship time. February 6, 1898, found community engaged in what appeared to be a religious service bearing little resemblance to any Christian worship I have encountered in 30 years of ministry. The congregation stood in concentric circles around Elder Blackwood. No Bibles were present. The elder's address contained scriptural phrases, but distorted beyond recognition, interwoven with references to vessels, essence, and the great harvesting. Most disturbing was the congregation's response: complete uniformity of movement, with members swaying in perfect synchronization and repeating phrases in a flat, emotionless tone. Nenwihin, before departing, Reverend Caldwell observed something deeply troubling. As I was being escorted to my horse, I glimpsed a group of community members emerging from a concealed entrance at the rear of the meeting house. Their clothing was stained with what looked disturbingly like blood. My escort explained they were processing a harvested deer, an explanation at odds with both the season and the expressions of horror I glimpsed on their faces. Deeply concerned, Reverend Caldwell attempted to alert both religious and secular authorities, but met with uniform dismissal. What he didn't know was that the Blackwood influence had spread beyond their isolated valley through systematic payments to officials at every level. The Reverend made one final attempt to investigate in April 1898. He never returned. His horse was found wandering 3 days later with saddlebags containing a partial journal entry. April 17, 1898. I have been shown something today that defies belief. A young man named Isaac approached me secretly. He has escaped from what he calls the chambers below, spaces beneath the meeting house where unspeakable acts are being performed. His body bears wounds consistent with his claims of torture and medical experimentation. The detailed testimony he mentioned was never found. The true horror of Blackwood Valley remained hidden until 1901, when a catastrophic fire destroyed the meeting house, exposing the elaborate subterranean network beneath it. The fire began during a severe thunderstorm on June 12, 1901. By the time neighboring farmers arrived to assist, the structure had collapsed into a smoldering ruin, revealing a massive opening in the earth where the building's floor had stood, leading down to an extensive complex of tunnels and chambers. Initial reports described the discovery in terms of stunned disbelief. We expected to find a simple basement. What we found instead was more like a mine shaft, a wide, carefully constructed descent leading deep into the earth. Wooden supports, iron brackets, even a primitive elevator system. This wasn't some hasty excavation, but something built with planning and purpose over many years. More disturbing than the engineering was the behavior of Blackwood Valley's remaining residents, who formed a defensive ring around the burning structure, actively preventing outsiders from approaching too closely. It was only when the county sheriff arrived with deputies that access was secured. By then, most adult male residents had fled, leaving behind primarily women, children, and elderly individuals, all displaying flat effect, identical phrasing, and mechanical movements. Sheriff William Tanner and 4 deputies made the initial descent on June 13, 1901. Their official report describes a subterranean facility of extraordinary scale. The main shaft descends approximately 40 feet below ground level, opening into a central chamber roughly 60 feet in diameter. This chamber appears to have served as a secondary meeting area, with concentric stone benches facing a central platform. Radiating from this central chamber are 7 distinct tunnels, each extending between 100 and 150 feet before opening into specialized chambers. The specialized chambers defied rational explanation. The first contained rows of narrow beds, each equipped with restraints and surrounded by apparatus, tubes, containers, and mechanical devices. Records identified this as the preparation chamber, where subjects were conditioned for the harvesting process. The second chamber, identified as the extraction chamber, contained surgical tools, drainage systems, and a central table with elaborate restraint mechanisms. The walls were lined with shelving holding hundreds of glass containers, many containing preserved human tissue, each meticulously labeled with names, dates, and notations regarding quality and yield. The third chamber contained rows of human forms in various states of preservation, suspended in liquid-filled tanks connected by an elaborate system of tubes and pumps. Some appeared to have been maintained in this state for years. The fourth chamber contained extensive documentation, journals, ledgers, and correspondence that would later provide the most complete record of the community's true purpose. The fifth chamber served as a workshop where specialized equipment was manufactured and maintained. Tools for precision metalwork, glass blowing, and chemical preparation lined the walls. The sixth chamber contained living quarters apparently occupied by the community's leadership during extended periods of work below ground. The seventh tunnel had collapsed. Later excavation revealed it led to a separate facility approximately a quarter-mile away, concealed within a hillside. As the investigation expanded, the true scale of the underground network became apparent. Tunnels extended throughout the central portion of the settlement, connecting key buildings and providing concealed access to numerous locations. Most significantly, a secondary network of narrower tunnels led to small, hidden chambers beneath 17 family homes. These chambers, accessible only through concealed trap doors, contained evidence of surveillance. Small openings in ceilings provided views into the homes above, while speaking tubes allowed conversations to be overheard. Beyond the physical structures, investigators discovered an elaborate system for documenting community members. Each family had a dedicated file containing observations of their behavior, transcripts of private conversations, and assessments of their suitability and potential yield. The most disturbing discovery came 3 days into the investigation. A sealed chamber behind a false wall containing what appeared to be the ultimate purpose of the entire operation. Dr. Harrison's confidential report described it. The central apparatus defies conventional categorization. It incorporates a raised platform surrounded by concentric copper rings connected to a series of glass containers arranged hierarchically. The entire assembly is connected by an elaborate network of tubes, valves, and pumps that suggest the transfer of substances from lower containers to higher ones. Most disturbing is the chair-like structure at the apex, equipped with receptacles that would align with a seated human's major nerve centers. The inescapable conclusion is that this device was designed to transfer something, described in their records as essence or life force, from processed individuals to whoever occupied the central chair. Elder Blackwood's private journal provided the clearest expression of the underlying belief system. The vessel theory has proven correct beyond my most optimistic projections. Each vessel, properly prepared and harvested, yields measurable transference of life essence. The process requires precision. Subjects must be maintained in optimal condition until the moment of extraction. The combined vessel approach generates exponentially greater results than individual processing. Family units, particularly those with strong internal bonds, produce yields far exceeding the mathematical sum of individual potentials. Most significant discovery, younger vessels, particularly those not yet reaching maturity, produce essence of extraordinarily high quality. A single child yields essence equivalent to 3 adult subjects. As investigators piece together evidence from the underground chambers, survivor testimonies, and recovered documents, a comprehensive picture of the Blackwood Valley atrocities emerged, one so disturbing that much was deemed too shocking for public release. Files unsealed in 1967 reveal the full scope of what Elder Jeremiah Blackwood called the harvesting, a systematic program of human experimentation and ritualistic murder disguised as religious practice. The program evolved through several phases. During 1867 to 1880, it manifested primarily as psychological manipulation and spiritual control. Elder Blackwood established absolute dominance over the isolated community, gradually introducing concepts about spiritual essence and purification through sacrifice. From 1880 to 1895, the underground facilities were constructed and the extraction methodology developed. Experiments were conducted primarily on animals, and evidence suggests on transient individuals who wouldn't be missed. Laborers, traveling salesmen, and indigent persons brought specifically for experimental purposes. From 1895 to 1901, the program was fully implemented, the systematic processing of entire families from within the community. Documents reveal that 27 families, comprising 114 individuals, were processed during this 6-year period. The harvesting procedure followed a precise protocol. First, families were selected based on Deacon Thorne's surveillance. Any expression of doubt, questioning of authority, or desire to leave marked a family for processing. Families with young children or pregnant women were particularly targeted, believed to yield essence of superior quality. Once selected, the family underwent a period of preparation lasting several weeks. Sister Mary Agnes administered compounds through food, drink, and medicines. Analysis later revealed these included sedatives, substances increasing suggestibility, and chemicals altering brain chemistry. The family would then be informed they had been called to special service, presented as a spiritual honor. Their property would be distributed to other community members, and an official narrative of their departure established. The actual processing occurred in stages. In the preparation chamber, family members were separated and subjected to further chemical treatment to open their vessels to allow the free flow of essence. Next came the extraction chamber, where the primary harvesting occurred. The process, documented in clinical detail in recovered manuals, involved systematic blood drainage combined with specific incisions designed to access the cerebrospinal fluid and brain tissue. The victim was kept conscious through stimulants during the procedure to maximize essence quality. Most disturbing was the family sequencing. Younger members were processed first, with parents forced to witness their children's harvesting before undergoing the procedure themselves. This methodology, according to Blackwood's notes, amplified emotional intensity, increasing essence yield by approximately 40%. The extracted materials, primarily blood, cerebrospinal fluid, and brain tissue, were processed through an elaborate filtration system before being transferred to the specialized containers in the central apparatus. There, Elder Blackwood would conduct what he called the absorption ritual. Seated in the chair at the apex of the device, apparently consuming what he believed to be the concentrated life essence of his victims. Blackwood's private journals reveal his belief that this process was extending his life, enhancing his mental capacities, and gradually transforming him into something beyond human limitation. He recorded increasingly grandiose visions of eventually becoming a vessel of pure essence, a being of concentrated life force, no longer bound by physical constraints. The recovered documentation reveals that the program accelerated dramatically in its final 2 years. By 1899, the leadership had begun processing families with no history of dissent or questioning, apparently driven by Blackwood's growing hunger for essence and his belief that the transformation was nearing completion. Medical examination of surviving community members revealed the physical effects of long-term chemical manipulation, neurological damage, hormone disruption, and evidence of systematic behavioral conditioning. Many survivors proved incapable of independent function after removal from the community, their personalities effectively erased by years of chemical and psychological manipulation. Most haunting were the interviews with children born into the community who described their upbringing as a form of continuous preparation for eventual harvesting. We were taught that our greatest purpose was to provide nourishment for the vessel. From earliest childhood, we participated in readiness rituals where we would practice lying still on the tables below while reciting the vessel prayers. Those chosen for harvesting were envied. They had fulfilled their purpose while the rest of us still waited to be found worthy. The investigation also uncovered evidence of broader connections beyond Blackwood Valley. Correspondence revealed communications with similar isolated communities in at least 3 other states, suggesting a network of cults practicing variations of the same horrific harvesting methodology. Most disturbingly, financial records indicated connections to respected academic and medical institutions. Several prominent universities had received anatomical specimens from an organization calling itself the Vessel Research Foundation, a front created by Deacon Thorne to monetize aspects of their research while maintaining secrecy about its true source. As the investigation expanded, it became clear that the Blackwood Valley atrocities represented not merely isolated religious madness, but a calculated, systematic program that had operated with relative impunity for decades, protected by isolation, careful manipulation of authorities, and the almost unbelievable nature of the crimes themselves. The most damning evidence against the Blackwood regime came from 3 primary sources: the meticulously preserved documentation found in the underground chambers, physical evidence recovered from the site, and the testimony of survivors who managed to escape the community's influence. Among the recovered documents, Elder Blackwood's personal journals provided the most comprehensive insight into the evolution of his twisted ideology. Dating back to 1865, 2 years before the founding of the community, these journals traced his transformation from a disgraced minister with unorthodox views to the architect of systematic atrocity. November 12, 1865. I have been shown the truth that the Church denies. Life force is tangible, transferable, and can be harvested from those who waste it through doubt and sin. My experiments with animals confirm the basic principle. Their essence can be drawn forth through specific methods and transferred to another vessel. The implications are profound. Immortality itself may be within reach. By 1895, his writings had evolved into detailed technical manuals for what he called optimal harvesting procedures. The family unit must be processed in precise sequence, youngest to oldest, with visual connection maintained between members throughout. The emotional resonance between parent and child creates a harmonic amplification of essence flow when the child is harvested within the parent's view. The parent's essence, already primed by grief and horror, reaches peak potency precisely 27 minutes after witnessing their child's processing. This is the optimal moment for adult harvesting. Deacon Thorne's ledgers provided equally disturbing evidence, documenting the business aspects of the operation with cold precision. Harvest summary, 1896 to 1897. Family units processed, 8. Total individual vessels, 37. Essence, yield, 162 standard units. Quality assessment, 73% superior, 21% standard, 6% suboptimal. Equipment depreciation, minimal. Staff performance, optimal. Projected next harvest cycle, 6 family units identified for processing. Sister Mary Agnes's notebooks revealed the pharmaceutical aspects of the operation. Detailed formulations for the compounds used to prepare victims, maintain them in optimal condition, and maximize essence yield during processing. Preparation formula number 7, enhanced. Base tincture of datura and belladonna, 3:2 ratio. Poppy derivative, 15% solution. Fungal extract from specimen number 42. Mineral compound from eastern source. When administered in gradually increasing doses over 14 days, subjects enter a highly suggestible state while maintaining physical health. Cognitive resistance eliminated by day 10, emotional amplification peaks at day 17. Optimal harvesting window, days 18 to 21. The physical evidence recovered from the underground facilities was equally incriminating. The harvesting apparatus itself, partially damaged in the fire but still largely intact, incorporated elements that forensic analysis would later identify as designed specifically for human processing. The central mechanism includes a complex filtration system for blood and cerebrospinal fluid, with specialized containment vessels measuring precise volumetric transfers. The equipment shows evidence of regular use and meticulous maintenance, with components dating from various periods suggesting ongoing refinement of the process over many years. Most disturbing were the preserved remains recovered from the third chamber, human bodies in various states of dissection and preservation, each carefully labeled with information about their processing. Subject 127, female, age 9, harvested April 12, 1898, yield 7.3 units, exceptional quality. Preservation maintained for anatomical reference. Exceptional neural structure in frontal regions. Note asymmetrical development of pineal features consistent with vessel theory. Prediction number 17. The physical evidence extended beyond the underground chambers. Excavation of areas identified in Deacon Thorne's records revealed mass graves containing partial remains of processed individuals, primarily skeletal material from which more valuable soft tissues had been removed. These graves, located in remote areas of the community's property, contained remains consistent with approximately 70 to 80 individuals, only partially accounting for the documented 114 missing persons. The testimony of survivors provided the final component of evidence against the Blackwood regime. Of the 47 community members still present when authorities arrived, only 12 were deemed capable of providing reliable testimony. The remainder were so profoundly affected by years of chemical manipulation and psychological conditioning that they could not distinguish reality from the belief system imposed upon them. Sarah Keller, one of the more coherent survivors, provided particularly valuable testimony about the community's final years. The harvesting was becoming more frequent. At first, it was only troublemakers, families who questioned or tried to leave. But toward the end, they were taking even the most obedient. Elder Blackwood had changed. His eyes had a strange light to them. He would speak about his transformation, how each essence he absorbed brought him closer to becoming something beyond human. The worst part was how they used the children to ensure cooperation. They would tell parents that if they submitted willingly, their children would be spared and sent to other communities. Many parents went peacefully to the chambers below, believing they were sacrificing themselves to save their children. They didn't know the children had already been processed days before. The most haunting evidence came from 16-year-old Thomas Weber, who had worked as an assistant to Deacon Thorne during the final months before the fire. I was responsible for maintaining the equipment in the extraction chamber. They said it was an honor to serve the vessel process, that I was helping build the new humanity. I believed them until I recognized my cousin's name on one of the essence containers. She hadn't moved west, as they told us. Her essence was in that bottle, and part of her skull was preserved on the specimen shelf. Elder Blackwood would spend hours in the chair, connected to the essence containers. After each session, he seemed stronger, more vital, but also less human somehow. His voice would change, his movements became too fluid, and sometimes his eyes reflected light, like an animal's in the dark. He said he was becoming the perfect vessel, the first of a new kind of being that would eventually replace humanity. The investigation into Blackwood Valley continued for months following the initial discovery, but the primary perpetrators were never brought to justice. Elder Blackwood, Deacon Thorne, and Sister Mary Agnes had fled before authorities secured the site, taking with them key documentation and an unknown quantity of essence from their harvesting operation. The manhunt that followed was one of the largest in Indiana history, involving federal marshals, state police, and local law enforcement across multiple states. Despite numerous reported sightings and several promising leads, the Blackwood leadership successfully vanished. In 1903, a man matching Elder Blackwood's description was reported operating a small religious community in northern Minnesota, but by the time authorities investigated, the group had abandoned their settlement. Similar reports emerged from remote areas of Colorado, Oregon, and even southern Canada over the following decade, but none led to confirmed contact or arrests. The most credible lead came in 1912, when a physician in Seattle reported treating a woman whose physical description matched Sister Mary Agnes. The woman, who called herself Sister Grace, had sought treatment for chemical burns consistent with laboratory accidents. By the time police investigated, she had disappeared from her boarding house, leaving behind equipment that suggested ongoing experimental work similar to that documented in Blackwood Valley. The final confirmed connection to the original perpetrators came in 1919, when Deacon Thorne's body was discovered in an abandoned mining cabin in the mountains of western Montana. The cabin contained evidence of recent occupation by at least 3 individuals, along with equipment and documentation linking them to the Blackwood operation. Thorne's death appeared to be the result of a failed experimental procedure. Surgical incisions on his skull matched those described in the essence extraction protocols, suggesting his former colleagues had ultimately used him as a subject in their ongoing experiments. Elder Blackwood and Sister Mary Agnes were never found. Their ultimate fate remains one of the enduring mysteries connected to the case. The physical aftermath of the Blackwood Valley atrocities was addressed with remarkable speed. The entire settlement was declared a hazardous site by state authorities and scheduled for demolition in late 1901. Within 6 months, every structure had been razed, the underground chambers filled with concrete, and the land designated as non-residential in perpetuity. This rapid physical erasure was matched by an equally swift bureaucratic burial of information. By 1902, most documentation related to the case had been sealed by court order, ostensibly to protect the privacy of victims' families and prevent public panic over the horrific details. Access to these records was restricted to a small circle of government officials, with penalties for unauthorized disclosure. The official narrative presented to the public described the Blackwood incident as a case of religious extremism resulting in multiple homicides, a dramatic oversimplification that obscured the systematic nature of the atrocities and their pseudo-scientific underpinnings. Survivors of the community faced a different kind of aftermath. Those deemed capable of reintegration were placed with relatives or in state institutions, while those too damaged by years of chemical and psychological manipulation were committed to psychiatric facilities. Follow-up studies conducted in the 1920s indicated that few ever recovered fully. Many lived out their lives in institutional settings, unable to function independently due to the profound neurological damage inflicted during their time in the community. The broader impact of the Blackwood Valley case extended far beyond those directly involved. The discovery prompted increased scrutiny of isolated religious communities throughout the Midwest, leading to several smaller-scale interventions in potentially dangerous cult situations during the early 1900s. The medical establishment was forced to confront uncomfortable questions about the ethics of research and the potential misuse of scientific knowledge. Several universities discovered to have received specimens or research data originating from Blackwood Valley implemented stricter protocols for verifying the ethical sourcing of research materials. Perhaps most significant was the impact on the collective psyche of the region. Even with limited public information, the Blackwood Valley incident entered local folklore as a cautionary tale about the dangers of isolation and unquestioning faith. Parents in southern Indiana for generations afterward would warn children that the Blackwood man takes those who stray too far from home, a distorted echo of the actual horrors that occurred. Today, the former site of Blackwood Valley remains undeveloped, a meadow slowly reclaiming former farmland, with only the faintest traces of foundations visible to the careful observer. No memorial marks the location, no signage acknowledges the atrocities committed there. The deliberate forgetting has been nearly as complete as the physical erasure. But beneath this surface of forgetting, questions linger. The fate of Elder Blackwood and Sister Mary Agnes remains unknown. The ultimate destination of the essence containers removed before authorities arrived has never been determined. And perhaps most disturbing, the question of whether similar operations might have been established elsewhere has never been fully resolved. The most unsettling possibility, suggested by correspondence recovered from the site, is that the Blackwood operation was not unique, but part of a wider network practicing variations of the same methodology in isolated communities across America. If true, the horrors of Blackwood Valley may represent only one chapter in a larger, still untold story of systematic atrocity hidden in the shadows of American history. What we know with certainty is that in the remote farming community of Blackwood Valley, Indiana, between 1895 and 1901, 27 families comprising 114 souls vanished without trace, processed through a system of exploitation and murder that defies comprehension in its calculated cruelty. Their suffering, largely erased from official history, stands as a grim reminder of humanity's capacity for darkness when isolation, authority, and twisted ideology converge. The meadow may grow over the foundations, documents may yellow in sealed archives, but the truth remains. Some chapters of our history are written in blood that no amount of time can wash away.